So, hello. I hope the first guests are already arriving. My name is Christoph Holz, and I'm going to give the talk today. I've been told to wait a little for latecomers, so let's do that. But in the meantime, maybe to give me a little idea about the audience, I have the chat window open, and we are going to use it for discussions. I believe we have quite some hot topics. So if you would be so kind to write me from the city where you are logging in from. So let's see the first one with the Q&A from London. That's perfect. It should be 7 now in your time zone, I believe. Budapest, wow. Oh, this is Kelchsau. That's close to where I live. I believe actually that's my co-worker. And you can use the chat as well, if you like. Just write me from the city where you are logging in from. Since I cannot see you, which always is a little awkward, so I'm really looking forward to seeing you in person one day. So it's about 8:05. So I believe we can start. We're going to have different topics. I'm talking about, happy end by rocket science. You know, if you're in a spaceship, people exhaust CO2, which is quite dangerous up there if you don't have enough oxygen and too much CO2. So we invented carbon capture technology. And this carbon capture technology actually can be used in real life on Earth as well. That's a direct air capture technology system by the company ClimateWorks. So they are in Canada, and they did an estimate what it would cost to extract 1 ton of CO2 out of the atmosphere. And so my first question to you, we are going to do a question round. What do you believe? How expensive is it to pull 1 ton of CO2 out of the atmosphere with a carbon sucking machine like this that you can see here? What do you expect? Is it, I don't know, $50, $100? Is it $200, $500, $1,000? What would you expect? How expensive is it? Please write me in the chat or in the Q&A. I give you a little time. So for you to have some time to think about how much will it cost to pull 1 ton CO2 out of the atmosphere. I'm telling you a little bit about me. My name is Christoph Holz. I'm computer scientist and rocket scientist by training. It was always very interesting for me to learn the intersection, to work at the intersection of digitalization and industrial revolution, of digital revolution and industrial revolution, if you want to say so. So, and I'm interested in these broad topics for about, I'd say, 25 years. So how to deal with climate change, how to deal with disease, how to deal with war. And I'm going to present you new findings about this and do a few thought experiments with you. And the first one is about carbon capture. And I read here millions from Katie and Paresh. I'm not sure, maybe I spell it wrong. Forgive me, please. You are quoting $1,000, for example. Actually, it's much less than this. It's about if you have optimal conditions, it's about $97 to pull 1 ton of CO2 out of the atmosphere. And this is done on a broader scale in Iceland. You might be familiar, I don't know if you have ever been to Iceland, that's the Blue Lagoon. You can bath in there, but that's actually a thermal caloric power plant. So they pump water 2,000 meters into the stone, into the volcanic stone, and get it very, very hot, more than 100 degrees Celsius, and then they force a turbine and create electricity. The fog behind there, you can see inside the fog, you might recognize the power plant, and the water then comes out there with, I don't know, 100 degrees, 90 degrees, and there are several cooling areas, areas where you can even bath if you find the right one in there, because it cools down from 90 degrees Celsius to 60, 70, and this where I'm now it's about 35 degrees Celsius. So if you ever go to Iceland, it's a very cool location, this Blue Lagoon, and this thermal power plants. This is Hellis Hell. So it's actually Hellis Heidi. I believe it is a very self-explanatory name, Hellis. I believe it's the hell's backyard, if you like to translate it. This is one of these thermal power plants, and they use their energy to extract, to get the electricity, to extract the CO2 out of the atmosphere. And what they are doing then is they're putting it back into the volcanic basalt. So within 2 years, the CO2 is transformed into rocks, which actually is quite a sad thing, because we might really have good use for this CO2, because this is what Energy Dome does. They use CO2 in this tent. As you can see, it's like a balloon. It's an inflatable tent, and they push CO2 inside, and they use pumps which use the electricity from the wind turbines you can see in the background. So they are able to store electricity, surplus electricity that cannot be used in the grid right now. They store it in CO2 pressure. So that's actually a CO2 battery, which, as the Italian designers claim, will be much, much cheaper than any lithium technology that we have now, at least 50% cheaper. And this happens because CO2 is very, very compressible. Of course, you should not never leave it out of the system. So it's a closed system. It's a closed system that that will leave nothing outside, and you can use CO2 to store electrical energy. But you can do even more. This, for example, is the company Synhelion, and what they do is this in Zurich, but there are first plants like this being built beside a German airport, a first test plant for that. They extract the CO2 out of the atmosphere via sunlight. They directly break it down and produce synthetic fuel. So if you have a ton of CO2, it's about a gallon of synthetic fuel that you can create. So I believe it's about 140 liters of diesel that you can extract out of that. And if you have enough surplus energy, it would be quite easy to set up a factory like this beside an airplane, and then beside an airfield, airport, and then you could actually suck the fuel for the airplanes direct in the vicinity of the airport itself. So actually, it would be sad to store CO2 forever inside rocks. It's much better if we can circulate them, because that's really that doesn't hurt the environment in any way. It takes the CO2 from the atmosphere and of course later on gives it back, but that's a circular idea. So if you $100 per ton might not sound a lot, and this is really under ideal conditions, maybe it's $200, maybe it's $400 per ton, but with every innovation cycle the cost is projected to half. So I don't know, 4 or 5 innovation cycles, and then because if you have this gallon, if you have 140 liters of synthetic fuel captured directly out of the air, 1 liter would cost €4, which actually we pay a lot right now, but this would be much more expensive. But with 3 or 4 or 5 innovation cycles, it's very reasonable to expect that this synthetic fuel that is produced by surplus energy from sustainable energy, from wind, from solar panels. You might have heard that Germany was not able to build new wind turbines, not because they did not have the materials or the funding, but because they had not the storage capacity that you need for renewables. So in the meantime, you simply could produce fuel for your airplanes in a very, very responsible way. So it's only a thought experiment, but if it was about $100 per ton, how expensive would it be to suck all the CO2 that we emit into the atmosphere, the additional CO2 that humans emit into the atmosphere? How much would it cost? How much would it cost to suck all the CO2 every year out of the atmosphere? Okay, now we would need 20,000 of these power plants, and it would not be millions anymore. It would not be billions anymore. Actually, it would be $3 trillion that it would cost to actually suck the CO2 out of the atmosphere again. And it can be done, by the way, everywhere. In Iceland, it can be done with surplus energy. In the Sahara Desert, the CO2 level is equal on the surface, so CO2 really travels very fast, and it has an equal distribution everywhere. So you really can do it even in remote areas where you don't have any use for surplus energy as well. The subsidies that the fossil fuel industry gets is $500 billion. Indirect, if you add up it with indirect subsidies, we are up to 5 trillion subsidizing the fossil fuel industry. So the money would be there. While it's not clever to cut all subsidies, just a second. Because, of course, sometimes in third world countries, in developing countries, these subsidies are used to allow people to move from burning wood to burning petrol, which is much cleaner and has a less CO2 footprint. So actually some of these subsidies are a good thing. But if you really think it through, if you have enough innovation cycles, and this is bound to happen, it may take 2 years, it may take 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I don't know how long it takes until the price of this synthetic fuel is cheaper than the oil that we are getting out of the oil that we are getting out of the planet, out of the earth. So it's going to, if this really works, it's going to outcompete the fossil fuel industry. So saving the climate by outcompeting the CO2, the other CO2 producers. So it might take some time to fix climate change, of course, but it's only and as people, we usually only tend to we usually only focus on short-term problems, but if this technology and several other technologies help us to get back to a temperature of global warming, a global temperature of the time before the industrial age, if we have solved this problem, we still face quite bigger problems, and you might remember Bruce Willis shooting down asteroids, dying while he is doing it, at least in the film, if you remember it. And you might have heard there are quite some asteroids that we overlook. We have quite a good asteroid detection system, but it only works if the asteroids don't come out of the direction of the sun, because there our telescopes only work for about 10 to 20 minutes per day, and the rest of the time we are really vulnerable. And 2 asteroids, one out of this area, only in this year passed through our safety zone. So the next asteroid actually is bound to happen. It's not always a bad thing. You might remember the Chicxulub loop, the asteroid who killed the dinosaur and made us possible. Yeah, if it had not eradicated the dinosaurs, we would not be here. They would still rule the world. But if an asteroid, a meteorite, hits Earth like this one, which was really huge, the temperature dropped about, I believe, about 30 degrees Celsius. So from, I believe, 25, 30 plus to minus, almost minus 10. So this would almost be 40 degrees. Why? Because it puts so much ash in the atmosphere that it really cooled down very quick. And if an event like this happens, we really, I believe, could use CO2 very well to solve this problem, at least at the short time. And you might have heard about DART. So NASA is really trying this out. They already bombed the first asteroid. It was a double asteroid I believe it was in spring, when they landed on this one asteroid, and they had this, I believe you must have seen it in the news, a lot of ash, a lot of sparkling. It really looked nice like this. So we really tried to manage asteroids as well. But if we are hit, we need climate competence anyway. So we really need to be able to have, if there are natural catastrophes, we really need the competence to be really able to change our climate. However, we need to survive on the long run. Now, you might ask yourself, why are they really doing this? Yeah, is it really about asteroids, or is it about something else? And of course, there is now, this is Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and they have a race to space. Actually, Elon Musk really wants to die on Mars, as he said, wants to be buried there. He just does not want to die there on impact when he lands. Jeff Bezos is much more humble. He only wants to go to the moon. He wants to have all the heavy industries, all the steel production and big plants, he wants to have them on the moon. At first glance, that's very expensive, but that's true. The green transition, the good thing about green transition is it's very expensive. So it's a real investment. It's a real investment opportunity for everyone. But he really wants to do all the heavy industries on the moon. And you might ask yourself, wouldn't it be too expensive to pull all the materials, to send all the materials from Earth to the moon? Of course, the production would be CO2 neutral for planet Earth, and the moon, I believe, would not mind. But actually, these asteroid tests that they did, they were about astromining especially. And you might have heard Luxembourg already has, I believe it's 300 million or 500 million, I don't know the exact number. They invest in astromining, so getting raw materials from asteroids. There is one asteroid, for example, who is completely out of platinum. So if we were able to fetch it and bring it down to Earth, the platinum price would really crash. But the idea is to bring these raw materials to the moon, which is much easier to do all the pre-production. And then the only problem is, if you have the ready-made products, how would you deliver them to the consumers? Oh, yes, there's Amazon. So maybe that's his long game. Obviously, he wants to go to space, and he uses space tourism. So crazy guys who have the money to fund his endeavors, his research. Of course, it's going to be very expensive, while Elon Musk is focused on Mars, and he needs robots. That's why he is creating Teslas and Tesla robots, and he needs underground tunnels. So that's why he has the Boring Company, the tunnel company. He needs communication technology. So that's why he has Starlink. So if you look closely, you're going to see that a lot of his ideas, a lot of his plans, what he's trying out on Earth, he's going to need on Mars. Only with Twitter. I'm not really sure what he's doing there. Maybe he has maybe he knows. Maybe he knows what he's doing. Now, actually, the topics of my talk, Happy End by Rocket Science. How can we use technology to save humanity's biggest problem, like climate change, disease, or war? These are thought experiments. And I believe in the idea of humanistic growth. So thinking about, how can I grow myself? How can I be part of this development? And especially with green transition, we can, of course, believe that the solution will come from Santa Claus or from politicians, or as entrepreneurs, as managers, as people who want to change things. We do it ourselves. And that's what I showed you. There are hundreds of climate tech, big climate tech ideas that are ready or almost ready to invest in, and they are really going to change the world, while politics will fight for that. Of course, with climate change, there are now two extremes. It's like young people believe, they tell us we are going to die of old age, and they are going to die of climate change. So there's really a big anxiety, which is not scientifically founded. And on the other hand, there are people who believe the Earth is flat and climate change is not man-made, but they simply underestimate human capacity, human capabilities. Some say to solve the climate change problem, we need a new moonshot project, but actually changing the climate as far as achievements go, the moonshot compared to this, the moonshot is really a children's problem for this. It will only be surpassed by its abolition. And climate change seems to be a Goldilocks problem. So it's fast enough that we recognize it, but it's slow enough. If you don't believe in all the headlines, it's really slow enough so that we really can do something. And there is no use for panic, but we really have to do it step by step, and we have to stick to solving these problems. And what I wanted to do is to open your mind for new ideas, seeing and researching for opportunities, because if we understand climate change as an achievement that we can fix and that we need to fix anyway, because there will be natural catastrophes where we need to be able to control our climate from the beginning. So this is a perfect opportunity for investments or studies or working, creating startups and so forth. So I used three quite different topics, which I stick together in the end. But first, it's about climate change. Second is disease, how to get rid of disease. And finally, how to get rid of war, which is a difficult topic, even more difficult than it would be climate change. But first, I'm going to give you a few minutes now to ask me some questions. Do you really believe what I'm saying? Can it be that we could solve that? The climate change is a solvable problem within some decades. It will take quite some time, and we will lose some ice, and we will have some tipping points. But in the end, it's a solvable problem. Especially, it's not about the temperature on its own. It's about how to cope with vulnerability, how to avoid being hurt by climate change. And that's what we do in green transition. So I'd like to give you a minute. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to look at them now. Yes, so Elisa was asking about the new system to change the direction of asteroids. And this is really in the beginning. Luckily, we have some still some fusion bombs, atomic bombs laying around. They have a lot of energy to really push asteroids apart. But the more clever idea, and that's what you saw in Armageddon with Bruce Willis, but actually the more clever way is to mine these asteroids. So to extract all their materials, if they're dangerous or not, of course, the other asteroids as well, and to give them, so to shift their, maybe to drill them apart, yeah, so they would be small on impact, And if you split them apart, it's like you change their trajectory rather easily, so they would miss Earth, and they would be smaller. So mining asteroids would pay for these endeavors. Any more questions? So let's talk about how to get rid. Please type in your questions. I'll have time. I'll make time to answer them. So just type them in there, please, so I get a real feedback. I need to know there is someone out there I'm talking to. So I have 3 thought experiments, and you could choose one of them. So how to solve our health problems, which are going to be very expensive too in the future, how to solve them, and with technology. And my first thought experiment would be health without hospital. So if the surgical robot knocks on your door, how would this look like? How to create quantum computers no longer with millions and millions of funding and doing conventional research. Why can't we just use a quantum computer to calculate them? Or, antivirus software. Yeah, antivirus software from your PC. Antivirus software checks your PC for patterns. And if it sees a foreign pattern, a dangerous pattern, it really isolates your PC or the parts where it finds it. And the same technique could be used to prevent the next pandemic. So number 1, maybe you can type in numbers. Number 1 would be healthcare without hospitals. So surgical robots at home, a quantum computer creating new drugs, just calculating them every other week, or antivirus, how to prevent the next pandemic with antivirus. That would be number 3. So please type in your choice. Maybe I do a joke in the meantime. I'm searching for my ex-girlfriend's killer, but no one wants to do it. Okay, so I do a choice. I take how to use software, how to use the idea of antiviral software to prevent the next pandemic. What you see here, that's actually, you can see it here, that's an X-ray of my hand. So it's, I have it here. It's a microchip. This microchip is about 10 millimeters long, 2 millimeters in diameter, and I had it implanted 6 years ago on a trade fair. Actually, I found the place where I could do that, and the guy, a piercer, I asked him, "Is it going to hurt?" And he said, "No." A bee sting at the maximum. I forgot my last bee sting, but I know it again. So here you can see this chip, how big it is. This is not really sharp. That's the injection needle. It sits in the tip of this needle, of the needle. There's the chip inside. So the piercer really has to lift the hand and then inject with 2 millimeters in diameter. So don't worry. Bill Gates is not responsible for that, and you cannot get a chip while getting vaccinated. These chips are far too big. We don't have the technology for small chips in these small needles. But when he really injected this chip, I really felt the resistance of my skin, 2 millimeter in diameter. And it did not really hurt so much. There was this adrenaline rush. I was high the whole afternoon. I now know why piercing is so addictive. I need some additional piercings myself. So with this chip, I can open doors. So most hotels, it would, if I put my chip close to the door, it lights red because it's not encoded, but this could be done. So in the future, I'd send my chip ID and to the reception, and I would not have to check in. I just could go to my room. And it allows for storage of 800 bytes of data, Bitcoin wallets, medical data, passwords, what the cyborg of today needs. For me, it was, of course, not about data storage. I wanted to experience what it is to be a cyborg. Yeah? Animals, pets actually have this already for a very long time. So I wanted to see eye to eye with my dog if I had one. So it's about the experience. My wife is a medical doctor. So when I came home, I told her and said, hey, what do you think about this, love? And she said, are you crazy? Unnecessary intrusion into the dangerous intrusion into the body. Who is going to take it out? You, of course. Yeah. I'm married to a doctor. So if you believe that this is crazy, I'm going to tell you about a small computer, the size of a coin, which is with a small cut in the back of behind the ear. It's for babies. It's pushed over the skull and connected with 26 wires with the brain. Here you can see the X-rays of that. Thousands of operations are done every year with this, and some of you might already recognize it. Maybe this makes it easier. I hope, yes. So sometimes you see people wearing these things on their head. It's a cochlear implant. So it takes the sound outside, and then it wirelessly transmits the sound information to the computer inside, so that what you can see outside is only the sender. The receiver is inside, and it's connected with the ear, which is part of the brain. And deaf children can hear. They can learn to hear and later to talk. So that's might sound like a horror story, but it should prepare you for things that might be very useful for everyone. I mean, if I'm old and can't hear so good anymore, my wife says it's already the case, but then I'm going to have something like this as well. I'm not going to fiddle around with ears, with headsets and things like this if I can have it directly implanted. So why not? This here is a microchip, and this microchip is able to do a complete DNA analysis within a few hours. So you only put a little saliva or something like this on it, and it does a complete DNA analysis. And in a few innovation cycles later, it'll be possible to have it as small so that you can, at least I would have it, I could have it implanted in my teeth. So it would get the energy from my chewing movements, and it could do, I don't know, 1,000 analyses per minute and of my of the saliva in my mouth, my microbiome, and if it finds something it does not recognize, a pattern like your antivirus software on your PC does, then it would connect via Bluetooth. That's why the name, via Bluetooth, and ask a database, is this going to be dangerous? And if the database says yes, that's a new virus, it's spreading, then I'm going to ask my health insurance, how much are you going to pay me if I isolate myself? So there are no privacy concerns. No one will ever know about this except my insurance, who is going to pay me for staying home. And I don't know of any cheaper way to handle a pandemic than this, because you know who is infected and you can give them the money to be able to stay at home. And for epidemics to spread, you only need to contain it in the first few weeks. So if, I don't know, 5%, 10% of us would carry something like this in our mouth, this would be an early warning system. So no virus, no pandemic would ever have a chance to spread to more than, I don't know, 50, 100, maybe 1,000 people, but it would be very easy, very easy containable. And if this is a little too strong for you, it's quite imaginable that when these chips, and they're going to get smaller, this is not even the latest version that I showed you, the chips are going smaller and smaller. They're getting smaller and smaller. So it's easy to imagine you're going to have a fiber thermometer at home like this, and it has its own DNA analysis included. So your smartwatch would tell you have a somewhat higher temperature, and it would be time to check, and then you did the check, and everything else would be perfectly worked out. So this is another idea, another thought experiment to give you some insights in how technology could solve medical problems. And I believe there are a few other questions now. I'll just have a look at the chat. So the system changed the direction of asteroids. Okay, yes, number one. What kind of recommendations do you have for us to fight climate change? So that's from Katie. Thank you very much. If I would ask you, what's the climate killer number one? What's the most dangerous thing that's driving global warming? You might say, okay, it's concrete, it's the industry, it's travel, air travel. For example. No, it's a small white machine that you have at home, and we call it refrigerator. Refrigerator are the top most climate killers that we know. Because first, of course, if you open them for a too long time, it's really a wasteful use of energy. So if you have a fridge, you open it and quickly close it again. If you had a thermal camera, you really could see the cold air flowing out and the warm air exchanging in. So you really need to do this quick, and to have it to have open fridges in department stores, in shops, that's really sinful. But the main problem, of course, is the fluid inside, which does the compression and does the cooling. And this FCKW or its followers, they found easier solutions, but it's still these are much more toxic for the not toxic. They are toxic as well, but but it's they are CO2, methane is 20 times more potent, catching the warmth, so accelerating the global warming, but they are, I don't know, about 200 times more dangerous for the climate than methane. And it's very, very, so it's very necessary, very important that you really check if you switch your refrigerator that it does not get punched, and that you really, that it's really taken care of by experts, so it would not pollute the atmosphere. I already know of a company, I cannot tell now, but there is already a small company who has a new magnetic system which only uses half of the of these pollutants, potential pollutants, to use it in the refrigerator, and this is going to change a lot. So look at your fridge, take really good care of it. Okay, so I have a few minutes left. So my last thought experiment is going to be about war, and we now know it's really it's heartbreaking what happens in Ukraine. But we have to ask ourselves, why didn't we have war in Europe for 70, 80, 75 years? And of course, we know that war broke out in Western Europe. Why did we have no war in Western Europe? And that's no accident. Some people say, thank God, but no, that's not the reason. The reason is because we have open access states, open access governments. This is Douglas North. He's a Nobel laureate for economics, which, to be true, is not a real Nobel Prize, but he has the Nobel Prize for economics, as we usually say. And he says that about 35 governments, 35 states, mainly the Western world, became open access states, which means you have a loyal competition between democratic political parties. So usually this deal, by the way, has been broken in the US for the first time in, I don't know, 200 years. But usually in civilized countries, if there is a change in power, then it's done. And if you lose an election, you don't lose your head. You have economic competition between legal personalities. So corporations, usually you have a welfare state. But the most important thing is all this leads to continuous economic growth. And that you don't have in developing countries. And this is mainly based on corruption. So if you had to point out a single point why countries don't have sustained economic growth, and I'm later going to argue that sustained economic growth, it really kills the calculation of war. If you have sustained economic growth, it's much too expensive for you to go to war, and you can check this with the data of Ukraine and Russia, for example. I don't know if you know what a Sportel is. It's a German word, to be clear. In Latin, it's a gift. It's Latin. It's Sportula. It's a gift, actually a basket. And this is a receipt that you can see. And in Prussia, Prussian bureaucrats could decide for about a third of their salary how much payment, how much you had to pay for a certain service. So you needed the governmental service, but the government servant decided how much he would take. That's actually systemic corruption, and we got rid of that. And that did not happen everywhere. And Douglas North looked at it very closely. And of course, I had to see it for myself. I went to Nigeria last year, of course, to see if I could find some fintech investments. They have the first 2 unicorns in Nigeria. Nigeria is really underbanked. This is one of the banking startups. It's ethical collection agency for microcredits. It's usually if you get a microcredit, you get shamed by your peers via social media. If you don't pay back, they call you. Yeah, they explain to you how credits actually work, and people the maximum sum is $2. Yeah, and it takes 14 days, and you have an interest rate of 1% per day. But you need this money, for example, to pay your telephone bill if you don't have money cash on you. If they call you, they usually get 40% of the owners of so if they want to collect it, 40% of the people pay right away, and then they are trained how should they work out with credits, and then they can have more credits later. Don't know if you can see this. All countries like India and China are going down population-wise. The only one of the few differences is Nigeria. They have 200 million people now, and they're going to have 700 million, and they are going to be able to sustain them because the economy can do this. And what they have, sorry, I have to stick to this one. The only problem that they have in development-wise is they won't get credits for their investments. If you need money to invest in your I don't know, machinery, if you sell bananas or coconuts on the market, it's no problem. But if you need machinery, you go to your bank and say, okay, please give me a credit. And they say, yeah, no problem. You get a big credit. You have a land. Yeah, I can take it as collateral. And then where's your land title? And then these peasants go to the government and say, I need the land title. And the government said, yeah, I know that's your land, but in my Excel table, actually it belongs to the guy who pays my Christmas holiday usually. So that's that. This capital cannot be used for investments. And 95% of all farmers don't have land titles. If they had, it would be worth about $300 billion up to $800 billion. And how can this problem be solved? These here actually are people who are on the way to us. Yeah, they're searching for a mobile phone connection. They want to phone home. And countries like India are changing land titles. Georgia does this, a Swedish government does this, even Honduras and other countries. They're going to use the blockchain. And the blockchain means their own bureaucrats cannot betray the landowners anymore. That's not going to be easy. It's quite difficult to register everything, and there is a lot of possibility for fraud. But afterwards, we ask an official in Georgia, why would you exclude your own bureaucrats from using this data? It's a government service, and the government excludes itself because you cannot falsify the blockchain. You could try to falsify the blockchain, but before you are successful, you get an energy bill, electricity bill, that you go broke. And that's even too big for Russia or China, this bill. So that's why you cannot falsify it. But of course, there is a lot of possibility for fraud. But in the end, if people want to invest, then if people want to invest, they don't want others, landowners, sitting there and claiming their land. So the countries will better do it in a right way, which will not be always unproblematic, but then people will really own this land. And how much money are we talking about? according to the World Bank, it's $16 trillion in debt capital. That's almost something we would need to stop climate change for about 10 years. Before I come to the end, there was one more question. What is your thought on Bill Gates' idea of spraying dust into the atmosphere to block sunlight? That's actually what volcanoes do. The Balinese volcano that kept the planes down for a few weeks and the temperature down 1 degree Celsius for 18 months. But that's sulfur. And it has a good reflection capacity, but if it rains down, eventually that's sulfuric acid. We call it acid rain. We don't want that. But if you do the same thing with iron salt, then this iron salt would not only reflect, it would bind the methane. We have too much methane in the atmosphere. We just, if we want to do this, and just is not the right word, if we really want to do this, we spray it in the atmosphere, it binds the methane, which is much more potent than CO2, and then it falls into the water. It creates algae there. You might have heard about the algae projects. That's the seeding for the algae, and then the small plankton would feed, and if it's not eaten, the plankton, most of the plankton would fall down to the bottom of the ocean, where it would be sequestered almost for eternity. So it's not about sulfur, it's about iron salt, and this is a very clever idea, and a lot of people are warning against such huge impacts. But if we want to protect the ice shield in Antarctica, the problem is not this big, because the winds there are circulating. They are not exchanging a lot with other winds, so the danger of spreading is not really so great. Now what? I hope I gave you some ideas about how just a few ideas, a few hints to look closer which big changes are here, and that you can be part of these big changes. People in my age, we tend to invest, and it's really fun. And there are climate deniers, and they are losing out all the fun, and they don't get all the investments. And okay, it's their problem if they don't want to have this. And there are a lot of really interesting climate tech, green transition jobs. And I said, the good thing about green transition, it's going to be really expensive. And what could be better if the economy really starts, and if we really do a good thing to save this planet for future generations. We still have a lot of time, but we have no time to waste. So with this message, I'd like to let you go. Please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. Christoph Holz is my name. You find me on LinkedIn. You find me on Instagram. Tinder. No, I'm married. But okay. And there's for German speakers, there's a podcast, Digital Sense Maker. So please, let's keep in touch and tell me what you got out of my talk. Thank you very much, and good night.